Man, I never imagined I'd be writing anything like this. My entire world came crashing down in an instant when my wife of 10 years cheated on me during a girls' trip. It wasn't simply a drunken mistake. She went all out, lying about being divorced and hooked up with a young stud several times. Now my marriage is in disarray, my daughter's family is disintegrating, and I'm left to pick up the pieces. Everyone tells me to forgive her, but I simply cannot. Let me explain how this nightmare unfolded. When it comes to love, I've always considered myself fortunate. I met Sarah when I was 26 and she was 20. We hit it off right away. She was beautiful, clever, and hilarious, and we simply bonded on all levels. After a few years together, I proposed on her 23rd birthday. She answered yes before I had finished asking the question. A year later, we married in an intimate ceremony in front of only our closest relatives and friends. The first couple of years of marriage were fantastic. We traveled, expanded our jobs, and simply loved being together. When Sarah reached 26, we decided to try for a baby. It took longer than planned, but after approximately a year of trying, we discovered Sarah was pregnant. Our daughter Lily was born 9 months later, and she has been the light of our life ever since. As working parents, we've established a comfortable pattern over the last 7 years. I am an accountant, and Sarah is a teacher. We both work hard throughout the week, but we aim to devote our weekends to family time with Lily. Overall, I thought we had a fairly strong marriage. Sure, things weren't as exciting as they had been when we first met, but I assumed that was to be expected after so long together. We continued to go on dates, have sex on a regular basis, and laugh together. I honestly thought we were happy. So when Sarah mentioned going on a girls' trip with her sister and several friends, I didn't think twice. They were simply heading to a Butlins resort approximately 30 minutes away for a long weekend. Not a big thing, right? Sarah deserved to unwind and have some fun. I expected them to do some drinking, dancing, and spa treatments, as is common for a girls' trip. I advised her to have a good time and not worry about me or Lily. We'd enjoy our own little father-daughter weekend while Mommy was away. The night before Sarah went, we had a great family dinner and then put Lily to bed together. Sarah and I then drank wine and curled up on the couch to watch a movie. When we went to bed, we made love. It was sweet and intimate. Sarah told me how much she loved me and felt fortunate to have such a lovely spouse and family. If only I'd realized that would be our last time together like that. The next morning, I helped Sarah pack the car and kissed her goodbye. She promised to call and check in every day. As I watched her drive away, I had no idea what was to come. There was no visceral instinct that something was wrong. There's no cause to be suspicious or alarmed. I was just looking forward to spending quality time with my daughter and thinking I'd see my wife in a few days, fresh from her brief vacation. God, I was so naive. How fast things may change. Sarah's first day of travel passed without incident. Lily and I had a great daddy-daughter day, visiting the zoo, eating ice cream, and watching some of her favorite movies. Sarah called that evening to check in, as she promised. She seemed upbeat and claimed they were having a good time so far. We chatted for a few minutes before she said goodnight and promised to call again the next day. The next morning, I received many missed calls from Sarah. My heart immediately began beating. Why would she be phoning so early and so frequently? There must be something wrong. I called her back right quickly, my thoughts racing with the worst-case scenarios. Was there an accident? Was she hurt? Sarah burst into tears as she answered. I couldn't quite comprehend what she was saying. I tried to calm her down by telling her to breathe deeply and talk slowly. Finally, she was able to squeeze out the words that would change everything. I'm so sorry. I cheated on you last night. I felt as though I had been hit in the gut. All of the air had left my lungs. This could not be genuine. Sarah, my faithful wife of 10 years, would never cheat on me, especially not on a simple girls' getaway 30 minutes from home. I must have misheard her. What did you say? I said, hoping I had misunderstood. I slept with someone else, she cried. I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. Please forgive me. I was unable to process what I was hearing. A million questions ran through my head. Who, how, why? I felt like I was going to get sick. Tell me everything, I was able to murmur, my voice shaking. Don't leave anything out. Sarah took a big, trembling breath and started explaining. She mentioned that they had gone out to one of the resort pubs the night before. She had a few beers and was feeling fine. That's when she noticed a guy looking at her from across the bar. She described him as quite attractive, tall, muscular, with dark hair and eyes. Apparently, Sarah decided to approach him. She claimed she only wanted to flirt and see whether she still had it. They began talking and dancing together. Sarah explained that one thing led to another, and they ended up kissing. Before she knew it, she was inviting him back into her hotel room. I felt like throwing up as Sarah narrated the details. The notion of my wife being with another man made me physically nauseous, but a small part of me remained hopeful that it wasn't as horrible as it sounded. Perhaps they only made out briefly and she intervened before it got too far. But Sarah disclosed the big bombshell. They had sex. Multiple times over several hours. She tried to downplay it, claiming that she kept telling him to stop and he would, but then she'd change her mind and want to continue, as if it made things better. I couldn't bear to hear it anymore. I hung up on her in mid-sentence and instantly banned her phone number. I did not want to see or speak with her. I needed time to comprehend the horror. The remainder of the day was a blur. I called in ill to work because I couldn't focus on anything. I fluctuated between wanting to cry, shout, and destroy objects. How could she have done this to me, to our family? How about our daughter? Part of me still didn't believe it was true. Sarah had never given me a reason not to trust her. We had a good marriage, or so I believed. What has changed? What am I missing? Had I overlooked any signs? I scoured my head for any red indicators. Did she appear distant lately? Not interested in sex? Protective of her phone? But nothing came to mind that was unusual. Everything seemed normal until she went on that trip. As the day progressed, the disbelief subsided and rage set in. How dare she end our marriage for a cheap hookup? Did our promises mean nothing to her? Did she not think of me or Lily at all? The more I thought about it, the angrier I felt. I wanted answers. I wanted to approach her and hear her pitiful justifications face to face. But another part of me didn't want to see her again. I alternated between demanding she come home immediately and telling her never to return. By that evening, my phone was inundated with calls and texts, not just from Sarah, but also from her sister, friends, and even my own mother. Clearly, word had spread about what happened. I disregarded them all. I wasn't prepared to face anyone else's ideas or judgment. I just wanted to be alone with my fury and sadness. As I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, one thought kept running through my mind. My marriage had ended. There was no returning from this level of betrayal. I had always convinced myself that cheating was my only deal breaker. Now I had to decide whether I truly meant it. The next morning I awoke hoping it had all been a bad nightmare. However, the bad feeling in my stomach and the deluge of missed calls on my phone revealed that it was all too real. I was still not ready to speak with Sarah or anybody else, so I ignored the calls and messages. I managed to get Lily to school while putting on a brave face so she wouldn't notice anything was wrong. As soon as she was gone, I began looking for additional information. I needed to know the entire truth before deciding what to do next. I accessed our shared cell phone account and reviewed Sarah's call and text history. Sure enough, she had been texting and calling an unknown number for several days. My blood boiled as I envisioned her sexting with this guy and planned their hookup. Next, I reviewed our credit card statements. Her excursion had resulted in several hefty bar tabs. Clearly, she had been drinking excessively. But that wasn't an excuse in my book. I also discovered a charge for an upgraded hotel room, from the double she was meant to share with her sister to a king suite. My gut churned as I imagined her and that guy on that large bed together. Desperate for additional information, I did something I'm not proud of. I hacked Sarah's email and social media account. I knew it was a significant violation of privacy, but I thought I had the right to know exactly what I was dealing with. What I discovered made me sick. Sarah and the person she cheated with, Jake, exchanged dozens of amorous direct messages. Based on the timestamps, they had been chatting non-stop since meeting the first night. The texts were explicit and graphic. Sarah told Jake how sexy he was and how much she enjoyed their evening together. She claimed she hadn't had such good sex in years. She even gave him some explicit photographs that were obviously intended for his eyes only. Jake inquired if she wanted to meet again before leaving. Sarah's statement made my blood run cold. I wish I could, but I should probably get back to my husband and kid. This was fun, but it has to be a one-time thing. So, not only had she cheated, but she had already resumed her position as dedicated wife and mother. The hypocrisy made me want to scream. How could she act as if nothing had occurred? At that time, I was shivering with wrath. I wanted nothing more than to drive to the resort, pull Sarah home, and yell at her until I was hoarse. But I knew I needed to remain calm, at least until I figured out my next moves. I spent the remainder of the day gathering all of the evidence I had discovered, including screenshots, credit card bills, hotel receipts, and more. I collected everything into a file that I intended to give to a divorce lawyer, because at this point, I was confident our marriage was over. Some folks may say I was overreacting. That one drunken mistake should not negate 13 years of togetherness. But this wasn't just a trivial indiscretion for me. It was a total betrayal of everything we had accomplished together. She had lied, snuck around, and abandoned me and our daughter for another man. How could I possibly trust her again after that? Furthermore, the fact that she was continually contacting the guy and lying about being divorced convinced me that this wasn't a one-time failure in judgment. She had aggressively pursued this and appeared to have no genuine regrets. Who knows how long it would have lasted if I hadn't stopped her? By the evening, I'd worked myself up to the point where I couldn't wait any longer to confront Sarah. I eventually cleared her number and called her. She answered on the first call, her voice filled with tears and relief that I was finally speaking with her. But I didn't give her an opportunity to speak. I let out all my rage and grief, telling her I knew everything. I threw all of the evidence at her, including the improved room and the messages from Jake. I called her every derogatory name I could think of. I told her that she had single-handedly destroyed our family. Sarah attempted to defend herself, making excuses about being inebriated and lonely. She swore it was a one-time error that would not happen again. She begged me for forgiveness, stating she would do anything to save our marriage. But I was done listening to her lies and excuses. I told her not to bother coming home. Her belongings would be packed and waiting on the front lawn. I told her I didn't want to see her again, except to sign divorce papers. I hung up and blocked her phone again, feeling both satisfied and completely crushed. After my argument with Sarah, I realized there was no turning back, but I still felt the urge for closure and revenge. I wanted everyone to understand her true personality, so I did something quite severe. I took all of the evidence I had acquired and set up a group chat with our family, close friends, and even some of Sarah's colleagues. I revealed every painful detail of her betrayal. I included copies of her messages to Jake, hotel receipts, and everything. I understand that was a low blow, but I wanted to control the narrative. I didn't want Sarah to be able to tell a story that diminished what she'd done. I wanted everyone to recognize her for who she truly was, a liar and a fraud. The responses began coming in almost immediately. Most folks were astonished and sympathetic to me. Sarah's own parents expressed disapproval at her behavior. Her sister, who had been on the vacation with her, apologized sincerely for not comprehending what was going on. However, some people thought I was overreacting. My mother, in particular, insisted that mistakes happen and that I should try to forgive Sarah for the sake of the family. She stated Sarah's immediate confession demonstrated her genuine remorse. I couldn't believe what I heard. How could anyone justify what Sarah had done? This wasn't just a drunken kiss. She had frequently had sex with another man and then continued to message him afterwards. How was I expected to simply get over it? Sarah returned from her excursion early the following day. I had already packed most of her clothing and personal belongings. When she walked in, I coldly informed her that she needed to find another place to stay. I didn't want her in our home anymore. Sarah burst into tears, imploring me to reconsider. She swore she loved me and that Jake meant nothing to her. She promised to do everything it needed to make things right, including quitting her job and seeking counseling. But I remained unmoved. For me, the trust had been permanently destroyed. I informed her that I had already called a divorce lawyer and would be filing paperwork as soon as feasible. I stated that the only communication I wanted with her going forward was to make arrangements for Lily. Speaking of Lily, informing our kid that mommy and daddy were splitting up was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do. She is only 7 years old, therefore she has a limited understanding of what occurred. We attempted to explain it in age-appropriate terms. Mommy had made a huge mistake that really wounded daddy, thus we couldn't marry anymore. Lily was understandably devastated. She cried and begged us to remain together. It broke my heart yet again. In that moment, I despised Sarah even more for subjecting our daughter to such anguish. The next few weeks were spent attending legal meetings, dividing assets, and attempting to work out a custody arrangement. I pressed for complete custody, no longer trusting Sarah's judgment, but realistically, I knew we'd likely end up with split custody. I also had to cope with an unceasing flood of calls and messages from friends and relatives attempting to persuade me to reconsider. So many folks appeared to think I should simply forgive and forget. That infidelity was not worth tearing apart a family over. But I remained firm. This was more than just the physical act of cheating. It was about lying, sneaking around, and showing full contempt for our vows and family. I honestly believed that if I hadn't caught Sarah, she would have continued her affair. How could I possibly trust her again after that? Plus, the ease with which she lied about being divorced revealed a side of her that I had never seen before. Who was this individual? Certainly not the lady I believed I had married. I felt as if our entire relationship had been based on a lie. Some folks inquired if I was concerned about finding someone new at my age, but truthfully, being alone felt more nicer to being with someone I couldn't trust. I'd rather be single than worry about my wife fooling around behind my back. As the reality of our separation became clear, I experienced an emotional roller coaster. I was angry some days and extremely sad others. I lamented the life we had created together and the future we had envisioned. My heart hurt for my daughter and the stable family unit she was losing. As the divorce procedures progressed, more details regarding Sarah's infidelity emerged. It turned out that the situation was considerably worse than I had feared. Sarah's sister and some of the other women on the trip told me that she had been acting strangely since they arrived at the resort. She appeared distracted and constantly checking her phone. They felt she was only concerned about leaving Lily and me. But it was now evident that she had been in communication with Jake well before the vacation began. Sarah had apparently met Jake a few weeks ago at a work conference. They had flirted briefly, swapped numbers, and had been texting ever since. Sarah had told Jake she was unhappy in her marriage and considered leaving me. She portrayed herself as a poor, mistreated wife looking for attention. The fact is that I had been working long hours recently in order to get a promotion. I felt I was doing it for our family, to make our lives better. But rather than supporting me, Sarah exploited it as an excuse to seek solace elsewhere. She told Jake that I was cold and distant and we hadn't had sex in months. All falsehoods, of course. When Sarah discovered Jake would be at the same resort on a guy's trip, she planned the entire girls' weekend to meet up with him. She had planned to cheat all along. The entire incident of approaching a random guy at the bar was a ruse. In actuality, Sarah and Jake had agreed to meet at that particular establishment. They feigned not to know each other at first, enacting a dream scenario for Jake's pals. However, as soon as Sarah's friends departed, they were all over each other. Sarah admitted that she returned to Jake's room the very first night. They had sex several times. She claimed she felt a bit terrible later, but not enough to terminate things. She continued to visit Jake throughout the trip, sneaking away whenever she could. She would tell her sister that she wasn't feeling well and wanted to relax in the room. Alternatively, she'd pretend she was heading to the spa. But she was actually meeting Jake for more hookups. They had sex in his room, her upgraded room, and once in a supply closet near the pool. The details made me physically ill. I couldn't stop picturing my wife, the mother of my child, sneaking around like a horny teen, risking everything for a few cheap pleasures. Did our marriage mean nothing to her? What bothered me the most was how readily Sarah lied to everyone. She looked her sister in the eyes and made up excuses about where she was going. She texted me goodnight, claiming she missed me. probably shortly after screwing Jake. She was living a complete double life and appeared to have no trouble maintaining the facade. Who knows how long it would have lasted if her sister hadn't interrupted them in a compromising position. Sarah swore she'd tell me everything when she got home. But I have my suspicions. I believe she only came clean because she knew she was going to be exposed. The toughest part was discovering that this was not an isolated incident. Sarah and Jake had been working up to this for weeks. They had an emotional romance long before it turned sexual. In some respects, it felt like a greater betrayal than the sex. I asked Sarah why she did it. Was I truly such a lousy husband? Did she no longer love me? She insisted that wasn't it. She stated she still loved me, but she felt restless and unfulfilled. Jake made her feel young and desirable again. But if that's the case, why didn't she tell me about it? We could have worked through our problems together. Instead, she chose to abandon 13 years of marriage for a fling with a younger man. It didn't make sense to me. I also wondered if there were any others before Jake. Sarah claimed he was the first and only man she had cheated with. But how could I believe what she was saying at this point? For all I knew, she may have been cheating throughout our marriage. The more I learned about Sarah's infidelity, the more certain I was that divorce was the proper decision. This was more than simply a temporary mistake in judgment. It was a premeditated betrayal that lasted several weeks. She had numerous opportunities to halt it or come clean, but she opted to continue lying and cheating instead. I couldn't stop thinking about how Sarah had been aloof or distracted in recent weeks. She spent those nights working late or enjoying girls' nights. Had she also been with Jake back then? How many other lies had I believed without question? The trust was totally shattered. Even if I tried to forgive her, I knew I'd be constantly wondering where she was and who she was talking to. That is no way to live. I deserved more than that. Lily deserved better than a mother who could so readily betray her children. It has been 6 months since D-Day, the day my life crumbled. The divorce is now official. Sarah has moved out and now lives in a little apartment across town. We have 50/50th custody of Lily and swap off every week. The first few months were hellish. I could hardly eat or sleep. I lost weight, and my job performance decreased. Some days, all I could do was get out of bed and care for Lily. The pain and rage were overwhelming. However, things have gradually become easier. I'm in therapy, and it's helped me digest things. I've relied largely on friends and family for support. I'm beginning to recall who I was before Sarah, including my hobbies, objectives, and sense of self. Lily is adjusting as well as one can imagine. She still gets depressed and wonders why we can't all live together. But overall, she appears to be coping. We've put her in play therapy to help her process her emotions about the divorce. Sarah has been on her best behavior recently. She is agreeable with the custody plan and child support payments. She continues to try to talk to me about reconciliation, saying she has changed and that if I give her another chance, she will spend the rest of her life making amends to me. But I am not interested. Sarah, whom I adored, is no longer with us, or perhaps she never existed at all. I can't look at her without picturing her with Jake. The trust is irreparably damaged. Also, I've recognized that I deserve better. I was a good spouse and father. I worked hard to support my family. I was loyal and committed. I shouldn't have to settle for someone who can toss everything away so quickly. However, it has not been easy to start anew at 39. Dating as a single father is challenging. I've been on a couple first dates, but nothing meaningful yet. Part of me worries if I will ever be able to completely trust someone again. There are still days when I miss the life we lived. When I see happy families out together, it hurts. When Lily screams for her mother during my weeks, my heart breaks all over again. I despise that my kid has to commute between 2 houses due to her mother's selfishness. But then I remember everything Sarah did. Not just the physical adultery, but the weeks spent lying and sneaking about. She was intending to cheat before leaving for the trip. The way she informed Jake she was divorced, like if our marriage was irrelevant. If I hadn't caught her, I honestly believe the affair would have continued. She just confessed because she was trapped in a corner. How could I ever trust her again after that kind of betrayal? So at 39, I'm beginning over. Single dad, returning to the dating scene, attempting to co-parent with a lady I can't stand looking at. This is not where I expected to be at this point in my life. But I'm trying to see it as a chance for a fresh start. I'm focusing on being the greatest father I can be for Lily. I am reconnecting with old friends and making new ones. I'm immersing myself in my career and pastimes. I'm slowly but surely reconstructing my life. But I would be lying if I said I never had concerns. In my darkest moments, I worry if I made the correct decision. Would it have been better for Lily if I had sought to forgive Sarah while keeping our family together? Is it too cruel to end 13 years of marriage over one mistake? Then I remember there was more than one error. It was weeks of deception and betrayal. It was a blatant disdain for our wedding vows and family. Sarah was actively seeking another man and intending to cheat, not a drunken error in judgment. Even so, I can't help but question myself from time to time. So let me put it to you, dear reader. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you try to forgive and repair for the sake of your child and the years you've put into the relationship? Or would you walk away, knowing you could never truly trust your partner again? Is there ever a way to recover from this level of betrayal? Can a marriage survive adultery? Or is the harm always too severe? I honestly do not know the answers. All I know is that I'm doing my best with the bad cards I've been dealt. So tell me, what would you do if you were me? Would I be foolish to contemplate giving Sarah another chance? Or am I correct to stay firm and refuse to accept anything less than what I deserve? I'm still attempting to find the answers. But for the time being, I'm taking each day as it comes and attempting to create a new life for myself and my kid. Only time will tell whether I made the correct decision.